So we're moving up to today's topic about setting up a training plan for females. First and foremost, I got a question. Is there such thing as female training plan, or is it just something that is unnecessary made up term, or what do you see yourself more applicable when you are working with your clients, males and females? Do they have some kind of things that is more common to specific gender, or is that more of a preference, what kind of body part you just want to build up?
I think for the most part, it's been seemingly more goal specific. Obviously, female goals are usually different than the male goals, and the training programs basically just are deciphered that way. There are a few physiological differences between male and female that do come into play, or I should say that can come into play with training, but it's pretty niche. And I would say it's almost better reserved for people that are really looking to maximize their efforts, looking to get the last few percentages out of every possibility, because it's a lot more work to be tracking things specifically. And it's coming down to the menstrual cycle. So it's a lot more work to be tracking specifically to the menstrual cycle and adjusting training nutrition based on that for the value it gives. It is a thing. It definitely exists. And I do have females that we do dip that deep into the details, but for most of us, it doesn't really become overly relevant at that point, and it's really just the goal. The goal is really what's deciding the differences between how their training looks, more so than the gender.
So when you talk about those differences in like throughout the period and whatnot, how relevant it is for someone who just wants to improve their health and improve their looks to look into minute detail about training in a specific different way for, let's say, a week of their month?
I think that's the biggest problem with people in the fitness industry in looking for, their goals in general, is they're overcomplicating things and looking for the details of everything, and they're missing the foundation. And 90% of us would get to our goals with just the basics in play only. The last 10% should be saved for the people that literally have maxed out and are looking to get those last couple percentages, dot the last I's, cross the last T's. Most of us don't need to get that complex. I think keeping it simple, it's just not sexy and trendy on Instagram, but it is the basics, and they need to be there. And if they're not there, chasing all the details won't work anyway, because you're missing the foundation. So I don't think it's absolutely necessary by any means to be getting that specific with tracking the details. It is informative, it is interesting, and some people, it may even improve their compliance. But from a physiological point of view, getting results, as long as the energy balance is right, the training program is right, that is more than half the battle, by far.
So what would be your order of sequence of importance for somebody who is trying to set up their own training plan? What would come first? Would it be fitness? Would it be strengths? Would it be, hey, make sure you have a logbook where you progressively overload every single week, and so on and so forth? What would you start with after assessing somebody that, hey, they are fit and healthy, they don't have any issues that might kind of hinder their progress? What would be step number one? Would you focus on, hey, let's increase your strengths, let's increase your muscle mass, or maybe something different?
It would be, what's your goal? Once you know what your goal, if it is to look a certain way, then we have to build your physique to look a certain way. If that means increasing muscle mass, strength training will become important. If it means reducing body fat, it would mean that energy output and nutritional input would be more important. But I would say, assuming that we want to look like, as the female goal is to be more like a bikini looking athlete or bikini looking sort of physique, I would say you need to spend a little bit more time strength training than not, because it is the muscle that's going to give the shape to the body, and then reducing the body fat to the level that is required to achieve what you deem to be acceptable in terms of how lean you want to look. So I would say it's going to come down to strength training is probably going to be priority, but it's never going to be in isolation. Like, there's going to need to be some endurance, aerobic activity, possibly some mobility training, maybe. That's definitely not as relevant.
if it's just an aesthetic goal. Same with flexibility and stretching. So I would say if you made me say one thing, it would probably be to improve aesthetics. It would be strength training for sure. Just putting some muscle on the body.
So when you talk about strength training, would you be kind of focused on, hey, we are working at such and such intensity, or would that be you need to lift weights? So just to clarify, would it be, hey, we are trying to improve your, let's say, squat and add 20, 30, 40 pounds to your squat, or we are trying to improve your ability to squat more frequently at higher volume? Which one would you chase for aesthetics?
That's a good question. And in a way, kind of both. If I am training you to get higher frequency of a lift, that's because I'm going to be putting more volume into that muscle group. If I'm training you to lift more, it's because I'm getting you to put more volume into that muscle group. So they kind of tie in the same way. But I would say genetics come into play, but you're probably going to see something along the lines of strength training, in the sense that you want to be lifting a relative percentage of your ability. And the reason that you want that for a female is because you want to maintain bone mineral density for long term, because we're speaking to women that want to look good, feel good, and have longevity, sustainability in mind. So bone mineral density is very important, especially for females, because as they age, when the menstruation stops, bone mineral density loss becomes more and more and more of an issue. You hear more stories of grandmas falling and breaking their hips than you do of grandfathers. So there's a reason for that. So women need to be strength training at around 80 to 85% rep max at least a few times. That is the stimulus or the signal the body needs to maintain that bone mineral density if they're a natural athlete. And that's the big caveat. If they are looking to get involved in enhancements, that becomes a completely different story. So for that, I would definitely say that we have to have some strength training sessions that are actually strength training, like literally looking to lift heavier intensity, not just repping 12 sets of 15 sets of 12, 15 reps all day long like you see most women doing. That's more of an aerobic based training that's not going to provide the same stimulus.
Yeah, so what I'm looking is that there is this trend that you always need to beat the logbook in your training plan and whatnot. And we both know that there will never be two exactly the same days. So you can do same exact training session week 2 or 3 weeks later, and you might feel 10 times stronger or not strong at all.
Yeah.
So, and I think it's probably more relevant that similar to weight on scale, that it might not be a true representation if you're progressing or not.
Right. I think logging is very relevant, but it's not for that acute scenario all the time. It's for the big picture and looking at the trends. If I have a female squatting as her first exercise for the first block of training, and then maybe it's the second or third exercise later on in a second or third block, she's not going to have the same abilities because it's changed exercise order. Now you can't go and compare, because you would actually look like you're possibly losing strength, but that's not really true because we've changed the order. Same with menstruation. I mean, it is common to see strength a little bit higher in the follicular phase and a little bit less in the luteal phase. So if you're across a 4-week, 5-week training block, you might have different levels of energy and strength. And that doesn't mean you're not progressing. It means you're going through whatever estrogen or progesterone peaks and lulls, and it's affecting performance. But if you log that over a few menstrual cycles, you would then see progress. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. This brings me to the next question. What is more beneficial, free weights or machines?
Well, it depends on what the context of that would be for.
So let's say goal is to be fit, healthy, look great, and let's say it's somebody who is a mother. So they want to go and play with kids as well. So they don't want to be just looking good and be fragile. They want to be looking good and be agile. So what what would you consider best approach for that type of the scenario to put in a training plan? Which would come first?
I can think of reasons where either would work for that specific mother, to the point that it would come down to context. If there is some possible injury risks, maybe machines would be better. If there was none of that, maybe a free weight would be better. If the energy balance is so meticulous that we're looking to get everything possible out of anything we can, you're going to burn more energy doing the exact same exercise with free weight than you would on a machine, just because more stabilization is required to maintain yourself under free weight. So you burn more. It's tough to say. Also, then aesthetically, if we're really nitpicking a specific muscle, sometimes the machine is going to be better at targeting that muscle, depending on how the person can actually, provide or basically do the exercise. I've seen some people do exercise taking that's so flawless that it doesn't really matter. But you'll sometimes see, curls, and all of a sudden people are swinging and they're changing the muscle recruitments that are happening. And over time, that will actually change the aesthetic look. So I don't really think one is better. In general, if we were just talking about targeting a specific muscle, the machines will do a better job. But if I want to get more out of you, just in performance in general, I think free weights will do a better job. So it would then just kind of come down to what is the priority, and is the client, how familiar are they with the techniques, etc. That's a real tough one. They're both going to be fine, but it really kind of depends on the fine details.
Yeah, you gave me a lot of questions in my head now. So first one will be complexity of workouts. How complex workouts should actually be for someone who's just starting out, who's been working out for a while, and someone who is reaching their peak aesthetics and strength goals. So what would you say somebody who's coming into gym and they see these Instagram influencers doing 50, 60 million glute variations? And
That's
like
ridiculous.
how relevant it is, and what would you actually do with that? And just to give you a kind of a notion, when I started working out for first 5 years, I only had a barbell available. So there were no machines and nothing. And everyone who was training around me, they had great physiques. So is there really need for ridiculous variety to sculpt amazing body, or should we just start with something simple? And how does it change as we progress in a sense of our ability to recruit muscle mass, and so on and so forth?
I think keeping it simple is by far the best way to go with this. You need a few exercises per muscle, and you need a certain amount of sets per week for that muscle. So I would say probably a couple exercises per muscle per training session is all you need. And you need probably, it depends on the level of lifter. If, like you say, if you're a novice lifter, 1 to 3 training sessions a week is enough. So if you do a couple exercises per muscle, you do 1 to 3 training sessions per week. And then we need to get probably, I would say, 6 to 12 sets per muscle per week. And that's all you need. I think constantly changing up your exercises is actually hindering progress, because the very first thing the body is going to do with a new exercise is the brain is going to interpret this bar path and learn the bar path and try to become efficient. So your initial sort of gains are more neurological than anything. And if you're constantly changing up the exercises, you're never getting to that actual muscular adaptation. It's all neurological that's adapting at first. And if you're constantly changing it, you're not waiting long enough to actually receive the benefits of the muscular adaptations. So I think people are shooting themselves in the foot with that. And then also, the muscle does what the muscle does. You're not removing the origin and insertions of the muscle. My bicep flexes my arm. It doesn't matter how many variations of a bicep exercise I put in. My bicep contracts, the muscle is activated. That's it. I think the people that need to get
super hyper focused on details are elite level bodybuilders, where they're looking at the ratios and proportions of every little muscle group they can see. I don't even think an IFBB pro bikini athlete needs to worry about that. They need to develop the muscle group as the whole: shoulders, glutes, quads, hamstrings, etc. They don't need to have 50 exercises to develop glutes. The glutes have 3 movement paths. We need to get those, but they don't need to be done by 15 or 20 different movements.
So you talked about just a couple movements for and getting in 6 whatever sets. Name me those movements. So you just named glutes. Women love training glutes. They just want training glutes. What would be your go-to exercise that kind of hits the home run straight away? And how would you implement it in a week?
I do think, despite the controversy that's constantly being shown lately, I do think the hip thrust is a very good glute exercise, but so is any hip flexion movement like a squat or a lunge variation. In fact, I think they're on par with each other. The difference would be is what else is involved in that movement. So if I have a female, and I do have a few that they don't want their legs to be any bigger, but they want to grow glutes, I would bias the hip thrust over a squat variation. If I have a female that doesn't have that, I might bias the squat. I might incorporate both, but the hip thrust is going to probably give you the biggest bang for your buck in terms of a glute focus exercise. But the squat, and then also the anatomical ability of the person to be able to squat to a certain depth becomes relevant for the glute activation.
So how deep do you need to squat for glutes?
Pardon me?
How deep do you need to squat for glutes?
Well, the deeper you can get, the better, because you're gonna get that stretch, median hypertrophy, and that's where the risk is with that. Because I hear a lot of trainers say, "Ask the grass all the time." Well, I deal with people that have issues with their lumbar spine, and ask to grass is not anatomically possible for everybody. If you have a very deep hip socket and you squat deep, as that femur comes up, once you run out of range of motion, if you're at parallel and you want to go deeper, you will go deeper by pulling your pelvis under you. And then you'll put a lot of stress into that lumbar spine through that flexion under that load. And it's only a matter of time, for most females especially, where they're going to run into a problem, because they just have a little less, not all females obviously, but the ones that are interested in looking like bikini athletes, they don't have that same capacity in their spine to tolerate that amount of stress, and they'll end up getting hurt. So if they can't, via their anatomy, get to a relatively deep squat, I would think the hip thrust would have a better stimulus for glute growth. There's nothing magic about any of the exercises. It really comes down to the right tool for the person. But if you had to pick one, I would say some sort of hip flexion movement, like a squat variation, leg press possibly, lunge, or a hip thrust. I think both of those are going to be very, very good. And from there, I would almost just consider secondary effects of it. If I want to minimize quad growth or not, I might, change my opinion a little bit.
I didn't hear you mentioning deadlift. What do you think about that?
I think the deadlift for a bikini athlete, if we're speaking of conventional, I think is probably not necessary. If we're talking about aesthetics, a bikini athlete, I would never put a deadlift in a program, ever, personally. I think the risk reward is way, way skewed in the wrong direction for them. And the deadlift, as in a conventional version, doesn't really target any muscle specifically. It targets the posterior chain from head to toe. And every muscle is involved in different ranges of motion. If I had a female and glutes were part of the focus and I needed a hip hinge variation, I would use a Romanian deadlift, because I think that's going to take the glutes through a full range of motion, and it's going to avoid pulling from the ground, which is where more of the risk lies in the female athlete. But it does have its place. A powerlifter obviously needs to be deadlifting. I have females that need to be deadlifting. But if it's an aesthetic goal, I probably wouldn't bother with the deadlift, at least not as, I wouldn't be prioritizing it as like a main movement anyways. A variation possibly for sure, but I think that it's overall overrated for bikini aesthetics.
Yeah, so it's more feels like maybe like an ego booster. Hey, I can deadlift this, but for physique, probably it brings me to next question. How do you control fatigue and how important it actually is?
Okay, I'll answer that. But to go back on that deadlift, I could say from real life experiences that a very common problem is a female that has a desk job, businesswoman, who is then told by her trainer to deadlift your body weight. Within the first few weeks, I've seen that herniate discs more times than people want to believe. The adaptations just for the tissues involved that need to take that stress, they just have not adapted yet. By the time that your neurological adaptations have occurred and your strength has increased that much, your tissues still aren't able to tolerate that. And it's very easy to cause a problem. So anyways, I just thought I'd point that out. In terms of managing fatigue, I think that you have to scroll back now, and that comes back down to in one of our original videos when we're talking about the original assessment, getting to know what does your life look like, what's your stress levels, work, family. We need to incorporate all these things, and it's going to come down to how's your sleep look, your nutrition. You're going to manage fatigue through a variety of methods, not just one. But obviously, you can only tolerate a certain amount of volume in the gym based on the level of lifter you are. So what I always have clients do is test their level of lifting, their abilities. It's not bulletproof, but it's very, very good. And then once it's in play, it's very easy to iron out the details. So what I mean by that is I'll have a new client test maybe their 1RM, well, not a 1RM, but their maximum deadlift, bench press, overhead press, squat, maybe a pull-up, how many pull-ups can they do, how many chin-ups can they do, or push-ups, something like that, and get an idea based on the strength standards of their demographic. Where do they stand? Are they an intermediate, an advanced, a novice lifter? And then there's a lot of research that has shown a certain amount of volume, like I mentioned earlier, per muscle group per week. That's how you start. And then from there, you just look at progress, how is it going, and adjust accordingly.
So it goes back to track things you do, track things you want to improve, and understand what's actually happening with your body.
Absolutely. I mean, you have to have a plan, and the plan should be very sound, based on what we know, and we know these things, but that it needs to be applied. And then we need to look at real world results to see how progress is going, and then we need to adjust. That's what the coach needs to be doing. Coach needs to be adjusting based on what's going on. Maybe the training program is, quote unquote optimal, but it can't be followed due to a compliance problem. It needs to be altered. You can't expect the client to turn their life upside down to cater to your training program. It needs to be the other way around. And then you need to be monitoring how is progress going and adjust it according to that.
So you mentioned something about, let's say, somebody who works a lot in office and whatnot, which brings me to kind of asking you, what do you do with these little stabilizing muscles and whatnot? Because a lot of people, they rarely even walk anymore. They just jump in a car, drive to office, sit there, do a meeting, maybe step on a stage if needs to for half an hour, 2 hours, then drive back home, sit in an office or sit at home or drive down to the gym, sit on equipment again. There is not a lot of movement involved. And then you are trying to do these big, massive lifts, but that integrity of your body just isn't there. So do you suggest somebody to plan something like that extra, or do you just suggest, hey, can you move a bit more outside of your lifestyle as well? Or, hey, just go for a run or do some weird things. Like I ask people to do a lot of weird stuff that I do, jumping and crawling and just standing in a split squat for 20 seconds, which very rarely people can do. And I hate that. And I do it all the time.
Right.
So how would you go about planning those kind of things, and are they relevant?
I think it's very relevant. Movement is medicine, but it's the devil's in the dose. So it's super important to not be sedentary all the time. So I very much encourage movement all the time. And when I design a program, it's not just here's your strength training program. I design a program based on the lifestyle in general. So if they don't have any movement, I ask them to get somewhere between 5,000 and 8,000 steps a day. It's totally doable. Like, you just have to have like, instead of taking the elevator up to whatever floor, like, use the stairs. You're probably going to cover your bases right there. So there might be like places during the day that you can basically alter a little bit to get more movement, but it is going to come down to the individual. I don't just want them lifting weights. I want them moving. Walking is phenomenal exercise. If you can just get out and have a walk, get outside, that has phenomenal health benefits. I would never just say, here's strength training, and I don't care about the rest of the day. I think everything has to sort of mesh together. And if they already have a certain amount of steps, they're already getting that. They're already having, maybe they walk their dog every day, or maybe they go on a family walk, or they have a pool in their backyard. They have other things. I just look at what else is involved in their life, and I cater to that. But if literally somebody is sedentary and they don't do anything, they drive everywhere they go and they sit all day, I am going to absolutely program in some movement other than just lifting weights.
So you talk about steps. How would you track them? Because some people don't like, I wear my thing. I know when I don't move, I don't need to track anything. I was away for a week now, and I didn't charge my ring and whatnot, and I didn't care. But I was walking like 6-8 hours a day for quite a few days. So I know I got my movement in. How would you assess somebody in sense of steps? And another thing is, for some people, it will be much harder to do these daily activities than it is to go to the gym. It's always much nicer to have a great glute pump than, oh, I need to walk around the block 5 times. So how would you program things so people can easier overcome them? Because once you are fitter and healthier and move a lot, you start feeling that you want to move a lot. It just comes. The more you move, the more you want to move. So what kind of strategies would you suggest? Hey, okay, your training sessions are great, but you're not moving a lot. Let's throw some of these in, and that will help you. So what is there some kind of secret sauce that you would use?
I don't know if there's a secret sauce. I think you'd still come down to looking at the daily. What does the day look like? And I would just look for ways to improve movement throughout the day. Like, maybe if they sit at a desk all the time, maybe set a timer or something that every X amount of minutes they have to just at least stand up. Just reach for the sky and decompress your spine a little bit, and sit back down. Even you have to start somewhere and maybe step up. Maybe just encourage a certain amount of fluid intake, which I would do anyways. And they'll have to walk to the bathroom a little bit more frequently, but it doesn't take a lot to get 5,000 steps in. Like, you can walk approximately 2,000 steps or so in 15 minutes or so. So you're talking about a couple walks during the day. I don't think is asking too much. So there will come a point where you may have to just say, hey, look, you just need to do this. I can't always, sort of trick them into the movement I need. If they literally are not moving, you sometimes just have to say you need to move X amount of time. And if they don't want to track the steps, then I would just have them track the time. Do 2 15-minute walks, like walk on your break at work. Walk, how far away is your car from where you park? Maybe park a little further. Maybe use the stairs instead of the elevator. Just look around for things like that. And if I can get 2,000 steps approximately in 15 minutes, I only need to get you to walk a couple times a day, and you're hitting what I would consider to be just normal life minimums. But again, it's going to come down to the individual. I don't have people, currently none, and over the last 20 years, very few, other than a few elderly female clients I worked with, where they're literally not moving at all. That is pretty rare. But I think that if they're just so eager to just be lifting weights, a 15-minute warm up on the treadmill, walking before you start lifting, you're already, nailing 2,000 steps just like that. And now you got to walk around the gym doing all your stuff. You're probably getting close to your step count just there alone.
So what I'm hearing is basically if you're going for Starbucks, park your car and go inside and get your coffee, and you're not missing out on scrolling through that phone whilst you're waiting in the car anyway.
Yeah, yeah. Like, I mean, some people are very adamant about the outdoor walks. I know some people are very adamant about it. Like rain or shine, you walk every single day, no matter what. And there's a lot of benefit and truth behind that. I don't get that, drill sergeant like with that, but I do think it's important to move. If the opportunity presents itself to get outside, I think you should. I think you should go out of your way to move a little bit. It's just going to be a matter of your level of comfort or discomfort, and what are you willing to put in. You can't expect to achieve your goal if you're not willing to move. Like, it just won't happen. You can't live at a desk all day, then move to your car all day, and then go to the gym, just do your 4 strength training sessions, and then go home. You will make progress, but eventually something's going to break and it's going to stop you. The longevity sustainability part is not being met in that sort of approach. So it's just almost like a ticking time bomb in that sense. But overall, I think that people that are motivated to make progress, they're motivated to move. So I typically don't run across this too often.
So would it be right to assume that 45-minute, 60-minute workout once a day and not moving much rest of the day is not the best way how to get the best out of your body in sense of health and aesthetics?
I would agree with that. Yeah, I would say 45 minutes. I mean, depends on what your 45 minutes looks like, but I would say that that's probably not enough. And there's different types of exercise that need to be done. If it depends now, if we're switching from aesthetics to health, other things need to be incorporated. Strength training's not going to give us the aerobic capacity that we need to consider for long-term health. There needs to be some aerobic activity happening. We want to be getting that heart rate up to 130 to 150 beats per minute and keeping it there consistently for 25, 30 minutes, that low intensity steady state. That's very good for building the left ventricle of the heart and basically building the engine. That's not going to happen in the gym. The gym is going to hit more that anaerobic side of cardiovascular training, not the aerobic side. So aesthetics and health, they go hand in hand for a while, then they start to veer apart when you're trying to really focus on one versus the other. But when we're just looking at looking good and feeling good, there needs to be some strength training, but there also needs to be some endurance or aerobic training. And you're going to get that by moving.
But I'm thinking it's probably useful to understand that it's similar to like when you deal with nutrition, you can eat once a day, but it's not the best approach. If you want to get best out of your body, you understand you're building your muscle tissue whilst you're training, but that movement outside the gym is what actually is going to increase your ability to recover quicker and get results faster as well. So going from all of that, could you give a quick summary for somebody who's just starting to work out? They've been in a gym in and out for a week or two and then forget about it for 3-4 months again and then come back again and so on and so forth. So what would training plan for that kind of person who is absolutely healthy, just want to improve how they look, would look like for first 2 weeks? What would you suggest them to focus on, and maybe some daily habits as well?
If you're just starting back and you've been lifting, you're going to get some of those neurological gains back a lot quicker. I would just have your goal very understood, set up the exercises needed to target the muscle groups that need to be hit for your goal, and implement them. If you're a novice lifter, I think 1 to 3 training sessions a week, 2 to 3 exercises per muscle, probably anywhere from 6 to 12 sets per muscle group per week, you're good. As you're getting more and more advanced, you need to increase the volume and frequency a little bit more. And I think that's it. You're going to want to look for ways of measuring progress. So maybe tracking your reps, tracking your intensity, as in the load on the bar, something, just making a note of it to make sure that you are increasing something. You're always wanting to look for some sort of progressive overload in some sense. More load on the bar, quicker rest break, slower tempo, higher repetitions, an additional set, something that's showing you progress. And then for daily habits, I think it would just come down to the individual. What does the day look like? Look for ways to improve movements, increase movements, maybe use the stairs instead of the elevator, maybe park a little further from the building, whatever you can do to sort of promote movement. I think that's the kind of habits and lifestyle you want to be thinking about, especially when you're looking at long-term sustainability, longevity, etc.
So just to interpret in my way, you're kind of supporting the notion that just do more than you already have been doing, in sense of don't try to chase what your famous influencer is doing and doing 15 million glute exercises and whatnot. If you do just couple exercises, couple times a week, and not even trying to go all the way out where you are throwing up, will still be much more beneficial than doing nothing.
No, you have to cause a stress to therefore demand the body to adapt, but you can't overdo it. You have to know the level of lifter you are. Like I said, I would score that. Look at the beginning I talked about in the video, look at your ability to lift certain lifts, and then compare that to the strength standards of your demographic. Get an idea, are you a novice, intermediate, advanced, elite maybe? If you're that level of lifter, you need a certain amount of stress applied. You can't just go from 0 to 100. You're gonna A, not recover, and B, probably get an injury or worse. So look for progress, look for continuous progress, look to make things more challenging as you can. Don't look to go from, like I said, nothing to what the IG supermodels are doing, because A, they're drugged, and B, you haven't been doing that yet. You need to so slowly adapt and progress over time.
Yeah, and you probably don't have time to do that, what they do.
Probably not, yeah.
It's probably more important to look after yourselves than trying to make sure that you look great on Instagram.
Yeah, and to be fair, a lot of what you see on Instagram is not true anyways, and how they're achieving what you're looking at, they're not doing that. They're not achieving that with what they're showing you. They're achieving it with other things that they're not.
I know you're not a big fan of going to like any kind of gyms and you're working out with your own setting. And I see this a lot where you'll see a person going on equipment and they turn the camera on and they scream and shout and whatever. And as soon as they switch it off, they just carry on doing something, and you just look at them like, "What on earth are you doing?" I don't like. Yeah, it's and then you give this weird perception to people that you are working so hard and you are going into these dark places and whatnot. And no, you're just a gimmick. You're just pretending.
Yeah. When you're looking at long-term sustainability, longevity, like just keep watching these influencers, see how long they're there for. You know, they're not there for the long run. Definitely not.
Yeah. And I think that's the notion of all this, is just to give people value that your health and aesthetics are improving, not give something so unrealistic that people just go, you know what, this is too much work. I'll just stay fun and happy.
Right. And I think what else is really helpful for female compliance is setting little stepping stone metric goals to be achieved. Like, don't think that if you have 100 pounds to lose, don't look at the bikini goal right now, because it'll feel like a lifetime to get there, because you've got a long time to get there. So look at things along the way that show you that progress is happening. When you make a lot of this stuff almost like a lifestyle, like a habit, it doesn't feel like work anymore. You know, it just feels like your normal day of life, just part of what your everyday habits. But if they are giving you progress, it's like you're not even doing anything. And actually, that's sometimes a problem. People are like, sometimes I have some of my clients saying like, "Are you sure I'm doing enough?" I'm like, I'm positive you're doing enough. Like, you don't need to be killing yourself to get to where you want to go. There's a time and a place maybe for that, but it's almost certainly not anyone that's looking to look good and feel good long term.
Yeah. Awesome, Scott. Mindful of your time. I appreciate you jumping on this, and I'll speak to you next week.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you.